if you have your Bibles, turn to John chapter 15. We're going to look at verses 9 through 13 to start out with. While you're turning there, I want to ask you a question. What does love look like? What do we do for love? Anybody want to venture out and try to answer that question? Everybody's like, no, my wife is sitting next to me, and if it's wrong... Okay, Carol said sacrificing. We sacrifice for the ones that we love, don't we? Okay, that's a very good answer. Any other ideas? Anybody want to jump out there? A commitment. Yes, very important. Anyone else? Service. Okay, good. Trust. I don't know who said that. Okay, thank you. Trust. Any other ideas about what love looks like, or what does love do? Crickets. What'd you say? It gives. Yeah. You know what? If we love somebody, we want to be around those people, don't we? The people we don't care for, we're like, well, I don't care to be around them too much. But we do, and we want to be around them. You know, if you probably remember back when you were dating and your husband or wife, or if you're dating now and you're like, you know what? I just want to be with that person. You remember those days? Anybody remember? I'm getting some stone cold looks from a few guys like, man, he had to bring that up. You know, that's what we do. We want to be around them. We want to be near them. We want to do things for them. We want to sacrifice for them. We're going to be committed to that particular person. In the passage we're going to read this morning in John chapter 15, this passage, Jesus is reminding His disciples or preparing them for His pretty soon approaching departure. And He has trained now, and He has led them for the last 3 years. And now He only has a few hours to talk to them. So what do they talk about? Have you ever thought about, if I only had 5 hours to live, what would I tell my family or my loved ones? Have you ever thought about that? What would you say to them? Well, you know, you might say, you rascal, whatever. We wouldn't do that. Jesus has said He knows what's coming. The disciples don't have a good grasp on what's going on here, but Jesus knows that He's not going to be around for very long, and so He's talking to them. So what does He talk about? He talks about love. Now, we're not talking about your puppy love that we had in the 5th and 6th grade when we sent the notes and says, do you like me? Check yes or no. Yeah, y'all remember those? Yeah. Those are crazy, but that's not what He's talking about here. This is not a romantic kind of love. This is a different kind of love. It is one that is willful and purposeful and is sacrificial. And Jesus teaches us a few different things here, and we need to listen in as He talks to His disciples about what love really is. John chapter 15. I guess I need to get there myself. I didn't quite make it. Starting in verse number 9, He says, as the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you will keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love. These things have I spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you and that your joy may be full. That's a really good idea. He's talking about that your joy may be complete. He says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. A very big obstacle, something He's setting the bar high for them, okay? He says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. You know, Jesus said here, I want you to love like I have loved. And they don't understand quite yet what He means. He says, greater love is no one than this, than one who lays his life down for his friends. Now, for the men in here, we say, we would do whatever we need to do to protect our families, wouldn't we? We make sure that maybe that the doors are locked at your house. And we would make sure that we intervene if there were to be a problem there inside of our home, and to protect them. And we would give our lives for our families. And Jesus says, this is what love is. He said, I'm showing you what the example of love really is. And He says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down your life for your friends. Wow. He didn't say for your wife or your children. He said, greater love is this, that if you lay your life down for your friends. Now, I want you to raise your hand right now. How many of you would die for me? Tracy, I love you, brother. You're my man, okay? I've got Tracy. I don't need anybody else. So I've got him. And I know he can protect me if I need protection. So, that's what we do. We would think twice about intervening for somebody who is just a friend of ours or an associate with me. Now, sometimes we'll see on TV or the news or some kind of video clips where a stranger intervenes and risks their life for somebody that they don't know. We don't see that very often. But Jesus says, greater love is this. There's no greater love than this, than one who lays his life down for his friends. What we need to know about Jesus' love for us, the great example that he provides for us is, number one, is that his love for me and for you caused his own death. That's what brought him to the cross. You say, the nails that hung him there. The nails didn't hang Christ to the cross. It was the love that he had for you and for me that held him to that cross on that day. It was a voluntary death. He said, I will give up my life for you. No one could take it from him, talking about his life. From what we know about Christ, God and man, nothing was going to happen to Jesus on this earth that God himself would not allow. So there were times, and I have a lot of favorite stories in the Scripture where Jesus is in the midst of the crowd and they're seeking to get after him. What does he do? He disappears. They're like, can you imagine what the company's like? Where did he go? They're looking down and see if he crawled off, whatever. And Jesus was gone. Why? Because it was not time yet for Christ to die. Nobody could take his life from him, but it was only his to give up because of his love for you and for me. He gave it up voluntarily in Matthew chapter 27, verse 50. It says, and Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and what? Yielded up his spirit. Said he cried out with a loud voice, and it depends on the translation that you said, he gave up his life. Gave up his spirit. He willingly and voluntarily gave it away. That's a hard thing for us to comprehend in this particular association. How he just said, okay, Lord, I'm ready. I am giving my life up for those sinners. What we also need to know about Jesus' death is that it was not a tragic death. Now we can go in and we look at different times when people's lives have been taken and say, that is tragic. If somebody is very young and there's an accident that happens, we call that a tragedy. And when we lose any family member, it's really a tragedy. But there are times we say, that was a tragic death. That was not the case with Jesus Christ. His death was voluntary. He gave it up because of his love for you and for I. It was love that caused him to stay upon that cross. We also need to know that his love on the cross brought victory over death. You say, how can death be victorious? Have you ever thought about that? Death is a bad thing, isn't it? Okay, I have a few people. Thank you, Jared, for agreeing. Anybody else agree with me? Death is bad. They're like, he's tricking us. I'm not trying to... Okay, who wants to die today? Just raise your hand with me. Anybody? Somebody went, maybe. Yeah, you're thinking too far ahead, Henry, okay? Usually we avoid death, don't we? We see the train running down the tracks. We get off the tracks, don't we? We try to preserve life. Normally we talk about death as being bad. Here in this particular case, Christ voluntarily gave up his life. We call that it can't be a tragedy because he gave it up, but we also know that his death was a victorious death. Now, if we take it a little bit further in our thinking about death being tragic and us not, we do all we can to avoid it. For the Christian, it's not so bad. I mean, that's not the worst thing you can do to me. Okay, my home is in heaven, and I'm excited to see it. I don't know when that's going to be. It might be this afternoon. It might be 10 years from now, or it might be 100. No, it can't be 100. That'd be 147. It might be 50 years from now. If I'm 147, it's a miracle. And I'll see you guys later because you won't be around. But that's when we look at it in those terms, yes. But when Christ died, His death was victorious. Jesus Christ beat the grave. Nobody else has beat the grave, have they? Not a single person that has ever walked this earth has beaten the grave. One of my favorite stories that maybe the young people don't. Harry Houdini. Anybody who does not know who Harry Houdini was? Anybody? He was a great musician, right? And he died on Halloween. And he told his wife, and I forget, I think he got punched in the stomach by somebody, and there was some internal bleeding, and it was one of his acts. He was about how tough he was, and this guy belted him pretty good, and he died a few days later from apparent internal injuries and so forth. But he told his wife that he would come back on October the 31st, I think the year after his death. He said, come back to the grave. I will be there. Harry Houdini has not shown up yet. Okay? No one has come out of the grave victorious, back alive again, and has sustained it. Acts chapter 2, verses 23 and 24 says, Him, being delivered by the determined purpose and the knowledge of God, you have taken. I don't have to turn there myself because that's all messed up. Maybe I'll turn here. By the law, by the purpose and foreknowledge of God, you have taken by lawless hands, have crucified and put to death, whom God raised up, having loosed the pains of death, because it was not possible that He should be held by it. There are a lot of things in this scripture here. It talks about the victorious Christ over death. When we look at that, it says, Him, Christ, being delivered by the determined and purpose foreknowledge of God, you have taken by lawless hands, have crucified and put to death. Those are that's kind of putting the period at the end of the sentence, isn't it? And put to death, whom God raised up, having loosed the pains of death. Because it was not possible that He should be held by it. Christ defeated the death. He broke the chains of death. And that's how He was victorious. You know what? If Christ had never beaten the grave, let's be honest with you, we'd be wasting our time right here this morning. There would be no reason why we should be here singing the songs that we sing and listening to the messages that are preached and giving money to the church so it can function and have ministries and so forth. That would all be a waste of time if Christ did not defeat the grave. Jesus' love held Him to the cross. His love brought victory over death. So what does that mean about us? How do we, as God's children now, live our life out? We need to live a life of love toward people. I don't know what your Sunday school lesson was about this morning, but ours in Brother Samuel's class, we talked about people who call themselves Christians who spew hate. There are people who call themselves Christians who spew hate. Now that's not what Christ did. He spent His time with who? Who did He spend most of His time with? The publicans and the sinners. The people who needed salvation. Why? Because He loved them. And He wanted to see a change in their life. Us, as children of God, we need to make sure that we choose love over everything else. Let people know that we love them despite their scars. That we love them despite their troubles. We love them despite all of the things in life that are going on with them. Our society likes to portray love as a feeling, and it is. But it's much more so. Love is a decision that I must love someone. There are people in the world that are not very lovable, right? But as a child of God, I must love them. If you've been married for a while, there have been times where you may not have liked your spouse. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands on that because that will get you in trouble. Okay? And I can promise you, there have been times where my wife has looked at me and says, I don't like him right now, but she still loves me. We need to make sure that we understand what that kind of love is. It is a decision that I will love no matter what. It's not just a feeling that we have. It's much more than that. The funny thing is, as you make that choice, the feelings usually follow. But it's not just in marriage where we must choose to love. Listen to Jesus' language here. We look in verse number 10 in John chapter 15. We're going to look at verses 10, I think 12, and 17. Let me get back to the first verse there. It says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love. Move down to verse 12. He says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Then go down to verse number 17. I don't think we have it in the screen. He says, these things I command you that you love one another. What is he saying here in all these verses? Keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I kept my commandments of my Father. Verse 12, he says, this is my commandment. He said, this is not a choice that you make. This is something that you must do as a child of God. And then in verse 17, again, he says, these things I command you, that you love one another. You cannot command an emotion, can you? You can't do it. I cannot say to you, if I were to tell you right now, Sonia, be happy. I can't make her be happy, can I? That's not something that I can command upon somebody. I can't say, Sonia, be sad, can I? I can say it, but it's not going to have really any effect upon her. I can't command you to have an emotion. But He is commanding us to love one another. He is commanding us to love the unlovable. He is commanding us to love the unrighteous. You want to know the best way to fill this auditorium up? It's not by any gimmick. It's not by having smoke on the stage or whatever kind of music and all of that stuff. That won't last. But if you want to fill this auditorium up, you go out and you love people no matter what. And they will be drawn to you. Love them. Despite the warts. Love them despite the problems. Love them despite sometimes your emotion. What kind of radical love is this? To love people no matter what. Now, it's not an easy thing to do. It's not the most easy command for me to tell you to go and just love people no matter what, because people do us wrong and we get upset with them, but we still need to love them. If we go down to our last verse this morning, we need to see John chapter 13, verse 35. We need to know this, that as children of God, we are known by our love for each other, and we are known by our love for everybody in the world. He says, by this all will know that you are my disciples. Then he puts the word, after this comma, he uses that word, if. If you have love for one another. If you don't have love for one another, then what does that verse tell us? Then you will be not known as one of my disciples. Do you want to be known as a child of God? Do you want to be labeled a Christian? Then we must love people despite what they say and what they do and how they act and how unlovable they really are. I'm going to chase this rabbit real quick. Do not expect the world to live like a Christian and base your love for them based on how they do that. They're not going to. Love them despite their actions. Love them despite their speech. Love them despite any of those things. And Christ says, they will know you by your love. You know, what a wonderful testimony it would be if the world were out there and they said, you know what? I know Jason Bell has got to be a Christian because he loves everybody no matter what. He just loves people. Despite their shortcomings, despite their sin, despite their actions, despite the words that they use, He loves them. Man, what a testimony that would be. What a great testimony would it be for people to say, you know what, those people at Pardee Church, they love everybody. There must be something different about them. That must be what the kind of love that God the Father had for us to send His Son to be nailed upon that cross. I need to know more about it. We're known by love. You also need to understand this, that love conquers everything. My wife's love for me overlooks all of my shortcomings. All the things I forget. And all the things I convinced her she forgot. Right? Love covers all those things. If my wife only loved me because I was perfect, it would have been done a long time ago. But love conquers all of those things. If God loved me because I was going to be a perfect Christian, I'd have been done for a long time ago. But love conquers all of those things. Do you love? Do people know that you love for them? Does the world know that you love them? John chapter 13:35. Ben, put it back up for me again, please. He says, by this, talking about love, all will know that you are my disciples. By your love, people will know who you are. You know, Griffin's not up here. I think he went down. They tell me, is that you cannot deny him. They know that he is my son. They say, you look just alike. Now, if you were to see me when I was a skinny 11-year-old, you'd really say so. They know him by our looks. When I walk down the street, people cannot necessarily look at me and say, that is a child of God. I can tell by the way he looks. But they can tell who I am by how I act and how I love. Do you love? Do we love unconditionally? Do we look past all the shortcomings and the issues and all the ugly things about people and love like Christ loved us? And love the way God the Father loves us. I'm going to tell you a little secret. If we do, people are going to want to be around us. They want to know what is different about us. They may even ask, I don't know what it is about Sonia. I've already picked on her, so I'm going to have to lift her up a little bit. What is it about Sonia? What does she have that I don't have? That she possesses this love that is so uncommon for the world that we live in. We live in a world of hate. To be honest with you right now, I don't care how they spin the rhetoric. This is a world of hate. We need to make sure that we are in a world of love. Show the love of God. Show the love of Christ. With their heads bowed and eyes closed, we're just going to have a quick verse. I don't know if you have, this is not a message that just brings flocks of people to the altar, but I want to give you the opportunity this morning. Maybe you have an issue in life,